Hey guys, so in this video, I'm going to be walking you through our herb garden and the herbs that we love to grow for tea and medicinal purposes. So you're going to get a little bit of a spring tour and a little bit of history or the reason I like them, what we use them for, their medicinal properties. So if learning about not only using natural remedies and herbs in your home medicine cabinet, but growing them is something that you're interested in, let me know in the comments below and give this a thumbs up. Okay guys, so first up on the list of some of my favorite medicinal plants to grow is lavender. Not a big surprise there. Lavender is so well known as being calming, helping to soothe with anxieties, and it's really great to use for anything on your skin. It's one of my favorite topicals to use as well. Plus, this one is just getting ready to begin to bloom. It has gorgeous flowers and they dry really well too, so it's a really easy one to preserve. So when you are going to harvest these, you actually want it, if you're harvesting these lavender buds, to do in making it into tea or to do into infused oils, which are the two of my favorite ways to use them. You want to harvest them right as the flower, just before it begins to open. So you don't want it to be fully blossoming. So actually right now and over the next few days, we'll let these get a little bit bigger, is the ideal time to harvest them and then to get them drying, and then you have them to use in your tea or to start your infused oils. Now, if you're wanting to know how to make herbal infused oils, I will make sure and put that down in the description below and also pop a link into this video for you, because I have a full tutorial on how to make your own herbal infused oils. The other great thing about lavender is it's one that will actually grow well if you have southern exposure, rocky, and it's kind of been really well for us with drought tolerance. So this is my southern exposure. It's a very rocky area, rocky flower bed right against the house, so it gets a lot of the radiant heat from the sun reflecting off both the back of the house and the rocks here. And I don't really have to water or baby this, so it can be a great one to put in a southern exposure where you've got a little bit drier conditions. So here I've got some of my other favorites, and I've got several of them in one large container. So with your perennials, both sage and my mints, they can get a little bit sprawling and invasive. The mint probably even more so than the sage. I just have a big half whiskey barrel planter, and I have had my sage and my mint have been in this same container going on, goodness, probably about 8 years. So just know, if you don't plant them in a container, they will send out runners and spread, and I promise you they will quickly sprawl and take over an area. So if you do plant them in the ground, just be aware that they're going to go everywhere. So if you don't mind that, then that's fine, but they can be pretty invasive, so I do recommend planting these ones in a container. Now, the first one that I've got here, the sage. I love sage for many reasons. One, because it's one of my favorite culinary herbs. It is so good to toss in with, I put it in with meatloaves and with chicken and with soups and stews, all kinds of things. It's got great flavor, but it's also a little medicinal powerhouse, and it's really pretty. It's kind of got this silvery green. They're really soft. They're almost velvety, so they give a pretty different color and texture when you're using them with your landscaping. The other great thing about sage is, so where we live, usually about the first part of May is when we have our last frost in the spring. And then in the fall, anywhere from mid-September to the first part of October, if we're lucky, is when we get our first frost. And the reason I share that with you is because sage is the one perennial herb that I can pretty much harvest all year long. So even though we get in the depth of winter, I'm not getting a lot of new growth. A lot of this older growth I can still harvest and use. I do dry some of it, but as long as it's not covered by a couple feet of snow, I can pretty much harvest some of my sage all year long. Not true of the mint. Though I love the mint, it will die back and I can't harvest it as long as I can the sage. Now, for sage, it's great for a lot of reasons. It's thought to help aid your mental clarity and your awareness. It's also really good for helping to clear up mucus issues. So think about when you have a cold and you have a lot of mucus, it can help aid with that. It's one, though, if you are nursing, you could use it to help wean a child if you're wanting your milk supply to decrease. But if you're nursing and you don't want your milk supply to decrease, then sage is one that you want to stay away from as a medicinal herb. The other great thing is, anytime I have any type of throat issue, like a sore throat, my favorite thing to make to help soothe that is a sage tea. So sage is great to have have in your medicinal cabinet, as well as it tastes amazing. And then the other herb that I've got in here is my mint. And I actually have two kinds. I've got a chocolate mint and then just a regular mint. Of course, we all know mint because it's such a great flavor. And mint is to help aid with your digestion. It's got lots of things, but most commonly we think about using it when we're talking about stomach issues, digestion issues, to help soothe with headaches is another thing that it's used for a lot. And I should say, I am not a medical professional or trained certified herbalist, so all of this is for informational purposes, not diagnosis or treatment. And even though all of these are natural, if you do have a medical condition or you're on prescription medications or anything like that, you really do want to check with your doctor and pharmacist, because they are natural, but they still can interact with different things. And there's certain herbs, if you have certain conditions, that you shouldn't be using them with. So with mint, one of those things is if you have GERD or stomach ulcers or a lot of stomach acid, even though we typically think of mint as being something we use to help soothe and aid digestion, it actually relaxes the sphincter muscle. And when that happens, it relaxes it, and then it allows acid to come back up from the stomach and into the esophagus area, and it can cause increased burning and acid reflux. So just something to be aware of. If you suffer with that, you might want to stay away from mint or use it with caution. Okay guys, so this next one you're not going to think of as a typical herb that you would be planting or even necessarily desirable, and that's going to be a stinging nettle. Because if you've never dealt with stinging nettles before, well, one, lucky you, they must not grow native to where you live, but they're called stinging nettle for a reason. These little babies can pack a big old sting when you come up against them. Oh, I used to hate them when I was a kid because we'd always go out and make forts and play in the woods, and they love to grow in shady and cool areas. So stinging nettles aren't really fun to deal with as far as going picking or brushing up against them, but as far as your natural herbs and using them in your medicine cabinet, they can be a powerhouse. So of course, anytime you're going to be harvesting them, please wear gloves and long sleeves so that you don't get stung. But the beauty is, once they're dried and cooked, so you can use them for eating too, as well as making tea, then they don't sting you. So we've been harvesting and using stinging nettles for probably about 10 plus years now. When you're harvesting them, the smaller, more tender leaves before the plant blossoms is ideal for you to harvest it. One, they're just going to taste better, they're not going to be as strong, and when they're younger, before it blossoms, you're going to have more of all of the medicinal properties are going to be stronger in the leaves. So you can pick them and use them just like you would any other type of green. So you can saute them up, you can use them like you would spinach or kale, cooked of course. You don't want to be eating them raw. But once they're dried, the stinging part goes away, or if you cook them, it deactivates that part. So for tea, of course, you're going to dry them, and then you'll use the nettle leaves to make your tea. They're really well known for helping with seasonal allergies, but they're also packed with vitamins, so they can help give you a good vitamin boost as well as help with seasonal allergies. And they've got some other medicinal properties too. And I will do a link where I've got listed out for you all of the different medicinal properties and different harvesting tips. So I will put that link in the video and in the description below, so you can go and check that out some more. But they will grow really well in shady areas. So this is the front of our house, which gets northern exposure. It rarely gets any direct sunlight, so it stays really shady and really cool. And they also grow in wooded areas in the brush. So they will kind of grow in full sun, but you'll find them naturally more in shady and cool, wet areas. So the next one is kind of like the stinging nettle leaves. It's probably not one that you're thinking of when you think of herbal tea, but that is going to be red raspberry leaves. Now, if you've got black raspberries or blackberries, they're all in the bramble family, and you can use those leaves for your herbal tea and your natural medicine. Now, I have a full in-depth video, so I'll pop the link to that down here below. You can go and catch that, and we'll put a link in here as well on harvesting and all of the amazing properties that the red raspberry leaf has. But it's packed with antioxidants and tannins and vitamins and can be used for multiple different things. Ideally, you want to harvest any of the leaves. Same thing as with the stinging nettles. You want to do it early in the spring before the plant goes to blossom. Everything is the most strongest at that point, and the leaves themselves don't have as strong a flavor, so you're not going to get that bitterness and more of that astringentness. So ideally in the spring you can harvest them, but if you kind of miss that window, still play around with it. Go ahead and harvest the younger, more immature leaves when they're brighter green and smaller, and see what you think of it when you make the tea and what you think of the flavor. Okay, so now we're back with echinacea, which I'm sure almost everybody has heard of echinacea when it comes to using herbal remedies. I think it's kind of like the poster child for natural medicine. But echinacea, of course, is known for its amazing immune boosting properties. And the great thing about echinacea is you can use all parts of the plant. So this one is not quite blossomed yet. It's a little bit too early. Probably, I don't know, we've got a blossom coming up. Usually this will probably begin to flower in about another week or two. So for me, it usually starts blossoming in about June, and then until we get a hard frost, it'll continue to bloom. So landscaping wise, it's gorgeous because it blooms pretty much the entire summer. You can use the petals and the leaves to make different tinctures and or to dry for tea. So usually it's used in teas or tinctures orally wise to help boost the immune system. And then once the plant is at least 2 years old, so at 2 to 3 years old, then you can start to harvest part of the root. And the root we don't harvest until the fall. So the thought process with that is after all of the energy has went to the blooms and the leaves and you get that hard frost, which kind of kills it and dies it back, then it takes all of the energy and all the good stuff and it puts it back into the root to store it over winter. And because it's a perennial, it's going to come back every year. So that's why generally you don't want to harvest the root part until after it started to die back, because it's thought to be the strongest. But if you harvest all of the root or do it too soon, then you're just going to be harvesting the entire plant, and your goal is to have it come back every year. So that's kind of why you have that wait period until the root has been well and established. But you can harvest parts of it and do different things with it all throughout the season. Now, for the echinacea, it does handle pretty well some of the drier, hotter summer conditions, but I had this planted over by my lavender that was our really hot southern exposure, and it didn't do well over there. It was too hot and it was too dry for it, and it was really struggling. So I moved it here, which still gets southern exposure, but it doesn't have that radiant heat off of the back of the house. It's got this rock here, but the back of our house gets a lot hotter. Obviously, it's a lot bigger service, a rock versus a house, right, for that radiant heat. So it does well here, and only in the dead of August, when we haven't had any rain for like maybe 4 or 5 weeks, do I need to give it a little bit of water if you just start to see the leaves drooping. But it does pretty well for me in those more dry, warmer conditions, but it doesn't like super hot. At least mine didn't, but it's excelling really good here, and we're moving into our 3rd year with it. If you would like to learn more about natural medicines and growing your own herbs, let me know in the comments below, and let me know if there's some specific things you would like to learn how to make or how to use, and getting in a little bit more. I hope you've enjoyed this herbal garden tour at our house, and if you did, that you subscribe so that you get a new video when they go live every single Wednesday. Okay guys, I will see you next week.